Gadi, have our leader.
Yes, he's going to lead us in this one. Read it.
Go ahead, Yossi.
Vaykonen Yirmiyahu al Yoshiyahu Eichayli konenu me'elav Ben shmona shana echel lidrosh me'elav Necham be'ovram chanu alav V'lo huzkar lo sigoy mifalav Gam bechol hamlachim asher kamu ligdor Lo kam kamohu mimot avigdor Dabak bo avon leitzanei hador Asher achar adelet kamu lizdor Auklim zera shichor kidmo hatov pichamo mishchor Vayigdal avon ve'shiv yamin achor Od lo shalach yado min achor Zaku amarav kinamda adlakim Bitza emrato baror asher lo yakim Chashak Toro kinyatsu rechokim V'etzamo asedat v'chukim Tovim re'im mikru kisholcho malach Mali v'alach hayom letalach Yedei am haaretz tamim b'malach Te'anesh b'vitz'i et pnei filach Kila hamonai lalechet arab na'arayim Laman lo tavor cherev kol shehu be'efraim Lo shama lachoze lashuv achorayim Ki gzeira nigzera lesachsech Mitzrayim b'Mitzrayim Mechatot stirat mizuzot Hazon antoti heichelu levazot Nau anamim lechumo lehavzot Lo yisei panav v'safdu alzot Suru heidu ad lo shia Imanu sor umat yesod nishia Hanei karav V'lo alta lo shia Vayoru ayorim amelech Yoshia Odenu otzei meinav Begevyo nochatim Chet achar chet morim v'lo chatim Tzadu v'samu kamatara lachitim Vayizraku bo shalosh me'ot chitim Kalim tzadatu acharav ezon motafiu Ve'ad mitzui nefesh ma'asav efiu Ruach svatav ifta mipiu Tzadiku Adonai ki mariti fiu Tzisinov ki kano zam L'shalem shonam ba'avon bitam Tam ketem atov amzu b'fosham Yikonen alav kol eicha yuam zav Tam b'mikra echad kos megido lishtot B'moed shnat hashmita kegah keletot Tala esrim ushtayim meharos shatot Yisavdu lo eicha b'esrim ushtayim otot Otot Kinnot lubata mecholi Et ki shachachti mecholali Zamoti kilad yahili Rashati v'nasati v'nutash oli.
Okay. Adina Shulson.
So this is another Kinnot that was written by Rabbi Elazar HaKalir, the famous Paitan. And the topic of this is the atrocities of Titus, the Roman general who destroyed the temple and his legionnaires. And it focuses on the atrocities against the physical body of the temple as well as the people themselves. So how did we get to this point where Titus destroying the temple? Of course, I have to give a little history lesson. So the Jews of Judea became a tributary of Rome in 63 BCE. And interestingly, the Hashmonaim, if you recall the Hanukkah story, the Hasmoneans had become the both the high priests and the kings of Judea. And they, even though they were fighting for to keep, the Greek, the Seleucid Greek influence out, ultimately in 63, they end up calling the Romans in to help them adjudicate in their own civil war. So there's kind of some irony there. And so Pompey comes and Judea remains semi-independent, but it's a tributary and has to pay taxes to Rome. Ultimately, the Hasmoneans fall out of power, and everybody knows about Herod, who becomes the king of Judea. He undergoes this great renovation project to build the Beit HaMikdash, the second temple. It's already built, but he renovates it into that image, the glory that we all imagine the second temple to be. But in 66 CE, the Jews, first in Caesarea and then in Jerusalem, they rebel against Rome, against heavy taxes, a familiar theme, I suppose. The revolt is instigated and really led by the Zealots. So the Jews during this time period are sectarian. They have lots of different groups, and the Zealots are a group that under no circumstances want to be under Roman rule. So even though there are other groups that would be okay and make peace being under Roman rule, the Zealots will have none of it. And under the command of Vespasian, 60,000 troops come to this region. And when the Emperor Nero dies, Vespasian becomes the emperor and his son Titus becomes the general in charge of this area. And it's fascinating because it's this little area and yet there's so much attention. You know, so many soldiers are sent. The son of the emperor becomes the general of this area. Shows you how important they thought Judea was as kind of a crossroads between empires. And he begins a siege of Jerusalem around Pesach time, and it culminates with the breaking through of the walls in the summer, and obviously the destruction of the temple at this time in the summer. So back to our Kinnot, it begins with the moment that Titus enters not only the temple, but he enters the Kodesh HaKodashim, and here he profanes the Lechem HaPanim, the showbread, and he stamps the parochet, the curtain that's around the ark, and you'll see there's a very vivid description how the parochet is almost is treated like a body, and when Titus stabs it, it bleeds. And when he leaves the Holy of Holies, his sword is covered with blood. And the Kinnot continues to discuss other ways that Titus contaminated the temple, and he stole the holy vessels, which are sent back to Rome to be used for idolatry or other purposes. And then, again, in emphasizing how crucial this conquering Jerusalem was to the Romans, it talks about how Titus assigned 4 generals to be responsible for the 4 different sides of the Temple Mount. And 3 of the generals fulfill their purpose and break down the walls, but the 4th is unsuccessful. And this leaves the Western Wall, the Kotel HaMa'aravi, it leaves it remaining. It stays standing. Outside Ma'aravi lezecher hisrid bo v'tzag achat kotlenu v'lo rav rivo. And the Paitan talks about how God did not allow the 4th wall to fall. And this idea that as long as God's presence is somewhere remains, it could not totally be destroyed. And this notion that Hashem's presence is still at Har HaBayit has halachic implications, but I think that experientially, any of us who have been to the Kotel can continue to feel this idea of God's presence still being there and could hopefully return in its fullness. The final section of the Kinnot discusses a group of 400 Jewish children who were sent on 3 ships to Rome. And rather than be sold or used for immoral purposes or even forced to convert, these children throw themselves into the sea, and their final words are ones of hope in God and belief in God. And the Paitan leaves us with one final hopeful line. A voice from heaven responds to the children's plea. The voice is a call to God, and it says, Ura, lama tishan, awake God, why do you sleep? And I think today, in our world today, this is a kind of plea that we can all relate to and call out with all our heart in the hopes of awakening, God's mercy and helping us solve some of our problems today.
Hold on a second, Adina, just to get it on the screen. And it's Kinnot number 16 in the Kinnot books, okay?
זכור את אשר עשה צר בפינים, שלח חרבו, ובא לפנים ולפנים, נחלתנו בעץ כתימי לחם הפנים, וגידר פרוכת בעלת 2 פנים, יתומים גאל במגן מאדם, וימדד קו במראה אדם דם, מימינו דלך והשכיר חיציו מדם, כי יצא מן הבית וחרבו מלא אדם. על הגותו הבוט גבר, ונטע אל ידו, ומולו להתגבר. מצרים וכל לאום אשר בה גבר, ואני בתוך אביו ארוץ אליו בצוואר. אבותינו זרה, והכניסו בחוריו אכלה אש, וזה צואה זונה הכניס, ולא נכווה באש. עבדים חייבו בסוכו לבת אש, ועל מה בבית אש, ממרום שלח אש. בנפשנו טבענו, כהוציא כלי שרת, ושמם בעני שיט בא להישרת. אורנו נמק כהשכים משרת, ולא מצא 93 כלי שרת. נשים כשרו קיבה עריץ, בקרקע הבית נעליו החריץ. שרים לו פתו בבוא פריץ, בבית קודש הקודשים צחנתו השריץ. בחורים מבחוץ צגו מחוזקים, ותרו כי יוזק ב60 ריבו מזיקים. זקנים ניבטו כי הרשו משחקים, עשות רצונו והוא אסור בזיקים. שבת סוטן ויבוא אדמון, ויסבב חומה ועבד המון. נפלה עברה על ניני פיצל לך לוז וארמון, על קינות תשמדוק ארמון. על פתח הר הבית החל לבוא, ביד 4 ראשי תבשריו להחריבו. על צד מערבי לזכר השריד בו, וצד אחר קוטלנו ולא רב ריבו. אתה קצבת והרשית לפנות, ילדים אשר אין בהם כל מום משם להיפנות. למה רודשו גויים ולא שתה אל המנחה פנות, ושילחום לארץ עוץ בשלוש ספינות. השיבנו, שיבו קבעו בנבחי ים, ושיתפו עצמם יחד לנפול בים. שיר ותשבחות שוררו כעל ים, כי עליך הורגנו במצולות ים. כי תהומות באו עד נפשן, כל זאת בצנו, ולא שכחנוך חילו למשן. תקוותם נתנו למשיב מבשן, ובת קול נשמעה, אורה למה תישן.
Going to Kinnot number 21.
Hi. So this Kinnot describes the death of the 10 Harugei Malchut, 10 leaders from the Jewish people in the Mishnaic period who were martyrs and were killed by the Romans. Not all during the same time. I believe 2 of them were earlier, right before the destruction, and 8 of them were later. We also read about the Asara Harugei Malchut, these 10 on the Yom Kippur story, Tefillah, sorry. We read about all 10 actually, and we don't read all 10 right now today. There's a Gemara that I only read in a footnote, I didn't read it in the Gemara itself, disclaimer, that the reason that we read about the Asar Harugei Malchut now is that the death of the leaders of these martyrs is equivalent to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So when we lose our leaders and we lose the people that help guide us, that is equivalent to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. The beginning words of the Kinnot are Arzei Halvanon, talking about how they are like cedar trees, because cedar trees are super tall. And so they are the giants for us. They are the ones that we look up to. And I was thinking about the word cedar tree, and it reminded me of something else. There's a affliction that I don't know if anyone gets it anymore, called Sarat. Leprosy is like somewhat what it's kind of explained as, but maybe it's not exactly Sarat. But in Sefer Vayikra, it talks about Sarat, that it's a skin affliction that someone would get, and one of the common sins would be if you spoke Lashon Hara. And if you spoke Lashon Hara, one of the punishments would be that you would get this skin affliction. You would then have to leave the camp. And then in the Sefer Vayikra Parak Yud Daled, it talks about the process of how someone with Sarat can go back in to the camp and become pure again. And they have different ingredients of what they need. One of the ingredients is a hyssop plant, like a lavender, low to the ground kind of plant. And one of them is cedar wood. And Rashi talks about why would they need a hyssop. And there's other ingredients like these birds or whatever. I'm just going to focus on the hyssop and the cedar and the cedar wood. And Rashi says that someone who speaks Lashon Hara might feel like they are super haughty and proud of themselves, that they feel comfortable to talk about other people. And that's the cedar tree. That's the cedar wood, that they're super high. And the hyssop is low, and it kind of keeps a person grounded to know that they shouldn't be so haughty. So I was thinking, is it a good thing to be compared to cedar wood, or is it a bad thing to be compared to cedar trees, right? Is it super high and then I'm super like, arrogant about my, who I am, and I could talk about other people? Or is it like I'm a giant in a good way, like I'm a leader in the community, and how the martyrs in this Kinnot are described? And so I think that there's a balance here. When you are in a position of leadership, when you are like these 10, you are in a position where people are following you, people are being guided by you because they believe in you and because they trust you. To quote Spider-Man, I'm sorry, but with great power comes great responsibility. And so what that means is that when someone is in a position of leadership, sometimes even having to try, people are looking up to you and people are following you. It could mean that you can do a lot of things with it. It's a double-edged sword. I could lead in a way of good, or I could lead in a way of bad. And so here, this Kinnot is not using cedar to be like arrogance or haughtiness, right? It doesn't need to be like cedar and hyssop. It's just cedar wood. It's just a cedar tree, because that's who these leaders are. These leaders are giants. And I think what makes a good leader, and presumably what made these leaders amazing, is that they knew how to have that balance. They didn't need the hyssop to ground them. They knew what it meant to be a good leader. You can be a giant, but understand how to use your leadership position in a way that guides people, but doesn't put them down and doesn't make you feel like you have to be too proud. And so when we lose these leaders, which is what this Kinnot describes, it is like a loss to the community in a way that is like a destruction of our Beit HaMikdash, our temple. Because when you have a solid leader, a spiritual leader, a community leader who knows how to have that balance, that is huge. Because there are many leaders who don't know how to have that balance. As described earlier from that video, right? There are plenty of kings that went through Malachim, Aleph, and Bet that didn't have that balance. And here we're going to learn about and read about leaders who had that balance. And I don't think we should take for granted the leaders in our lives who have that, because that is special and that is not easy to come by. So let's keep that in mind as we read this Kinnot, and maybe throughout our lives as we come across leaders in our lives that inspire us.
Again, it's Kinnot number 21. Thank you, Adina. And we're reciting this one in English.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. Cedars of Lebanon, giants of Torah, shield carriers of Mishnah and Gemara. Powerful warriors exerting themselves over it in purity. Their blood was split and their greatness removed from us. Behold, they are the holy 10 martyrs executed by the Roman government. And for these do I weep, and my eye overflows. When I remember this, I scream in bitterness. The most desirable in Israel, the holy vessels, crown and tiara. Is the English the same?
No, you're reading a different translation,
So
actually.
I'll read this one. I just realized that it might be different.
Thank you. Thank you.
Leah, can you put the thing where I'm up to? Okay. Pure of heart, holiest of holies, slaughtered in horrible death. They cast lots to determine who would first be chosen for the sword. When the lot fell upon Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, he stretched his neck and cried, accepting the decree. The executioner turned to Rabban Shimon, killing him with pent-up fury. The descendants of Aaron, Rabbi Yishmael, begged to be allowed to grieve for the prince. Rabbi Yishmael took Rabbi Shimon's head and placed it upon his knees as if it were a pure menorah. Placing his eyes upon his eyes and his mouth upon his mouth with sincere love. He proclaimed a mouth vigorous with Torah, suddenly condemned to a horrible and freakish death. The prelate ordered to flay his head with a sharpened razor. He fulfilled with his skin the saying, "Get down, that we may walk over you." The villain did the flaying, and as he reached the place of the special commandment of tefillin, Rabbi Yishmael let out a scream, causing the world to shake and the earth to tremble. His merit will stand for all generations, and the voice of God in his glory.
There's more.
There's more, Leah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. I saw tough and I thought.
I know. And if you could just scooch left.
Oh, whoops.
Okay.
Sorry.
Afterwards, they brought Rabbi Akiva, uprooter of mountains, who ground and one against the other with his intellect. They combed his flesh with an iron comb to break it. His soul departed with the word one, and a heavenly voice said, "Rabbi Akiva, you are fortunate. Your body is pure in every manner of purity." Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, they brought in with a broken heart and a warning. Killed at age 70 by the cursed evil kingdom, he fasted frequently, was clean and pious, and was diligent in his work. After him was Rabbi Hananiah ben Tradion, assembler of great crowds at Zion's gate. Sitting and teaching, a Torah scroll at his side, they enveloped him with bundles of twigs and set them afire, winding the Torah scroll around him and lighting a bonfire. They attached moistened bits of wool to his heart to prolong his agony. The pious Rabbi Yeshavav, the scribe, was killed by the nation of Gomorrah. They cast him, threw him to the dogs, so that he was never properly buried. A heavenly voice declared that there was nothing in the Torah of Moshe that he did not observe. Rabbi Hanina ben Chakniai, and after him Rabbi Chutzpit, and that wrathful day, birds flying overhead were signed as if torched by the breath of his mouth. The righteous Rabbi Elazar ben Shammai was killed with a chisel. It was Erev Shabbos, the time for Kiddush, and as he recited it, they drew the sword upon him, not permitting him to live to finish it. His soul departed at the words, "God created," the creator and sculptor of forms. On and on, these villains tortured and threatened, stoning, burning, killing, and choking who can access this calamity. Of the remnants, lions consume those scattered sheep, eaten in a sacred place like the sin offering and guilt offering, leaving no trace. The special offering of breast and thigh, lion and cub devoured. May it be good in the eyes of God to never again punish us. Make firm the tottering knees of Yaakov's portion and deliverer in troubled times. The king shall reign in righteousness. Your days of mourning shall cease. By his light we shall journey forward.
Rabbi, you're still muted. Rabbi, you're muted.
I unmuted me and you muted me again.
I didn't
Here I
catch
am.
it.
Here I am. Okay. We turn our attention to Kinnot number 31, Eshtukad Bikir B. I want to teach you a little trick, a calendaric trick that we have that helps you figure out, it's really fascinating how it falls into place this way, the different dates on the Jewish calendar. It's called Atbash, and it's all based on the days on which the Pesach falls. The first day of Pesach, Aleph, corresponds to to a holiday at the end called Tuf. Second day is Beit is a Shin, and so forth. So that we know, for example, that if Pesach is on a Saturday night. I'm just making all right. Then Shavuos will be on a Sunday night because it's like second day is a Saturday night. So then Shavuos will be also a Saturday night. Put it that way, right? And if the first day of Pesach then is on a Wednesday night, so then on a Wednesday night Tisha B'av will happen. Aleph Tuf, and so it matches up a few different holidays. I was thinking about Atbash in the context of the contrast that we have. I pointed this out in one of my early morning 3-minute daily doses of Torah about the phrase we have in Chazal talk about Purim, Mishenichnas Av, Marbim B'Simcha. When Av comes in, then we intensify our rejoicing. And then in contrast, when Tisha B'Av comes in, Mishenichnas Av, Mema'atin B'Simcha, then we diminish our joy. There is a powerful contrast that's placed before us between our moments of joy and our moments of sorrow. Pesach, in certain ways, if you just sort of lead with the Atbash, it's not simply a correspondence of day to day, but I was really imagining in my mind's eye, right, Pesach is another time of ultimate joy, and its powerful contrast is Tisha B'Av. And we are meant to actually sit on Tisha B'Av and not forget the moments of our ultimate joy. They are there in our minds, and we are grieving the loss of those joyful moments as we now sit in our sorrow for what we've experienced. And so it is as we read this Kinnot, which is Eish Tukad Bekir B, we try to set up the contrast between what it must have been like to march out triumphantly and redeemed from Egypt, and to enter into Israel for that matter, and all that took place. And in contrast, the march out of Egypt, we think of the march out of Jerusalem and heading off to Babylonia, to Bavel, or to Rome, and those are the powerful contrasts we set up. And yet, there are two things to keep in mind. One is we have traditions that somewhere, we are not the experts on such things, about the birth of the Mashiach. And we think of, we sort of associate with two dates. The one is Pesach, and it's a time that's ripe with redemptive power, and so more redemption will come. And at the same time, we speak about Tisha B'Av as being a time, even though it is the intensified period of mourning, when all the events of these thousands of years are in our minds and in our hearts and in our grief. We think of the Mashiach as also perhaps being born as a phoenix rising, as it were, on Tisha B'Av too. And so in all of it, we still allow ourselves to imagine. And so the last lines of this Kinnot will be Sason v'simcha v'nas yagon v'anacha b'shuvi l'Yerushalayim, that indeed there'll be rejoicing, Sason and Simcha, and all Yagon v'anacha, and all the groaning and sorrowfulness will flee from us on the day that we return to Jerusalem. And we know this is, living in the gift of this era. We know already the beginning of that, and we hope and we pray for the completion of that soon in our times. So there's a melody that we sing for this. Again, it's usually much more powerful when we're all in the same room together, and the call and the response are clear and apparent. But I'm going to recite my lines, and your job is to say either B'tzeiti Mitzrayim or B'tzeiti Yerushalayim in response. And there's the melody, if you don't know it, you'll pick up relatively quickly, and you'll sing it only that you and the people in your room will be able to hear. And so the first line we sing with sort of triumphant sound, and the second line reverts back to mournful. Page 30, this is Kinnot 31, and you're on the screen in front of you, or in the Koran booklet, book 515. Eish Tukad Bekir Bi Balosi Al Libi B'tzei Mitzrayim V'kini Ma'ira L'manas Kira B'tzei Mirushalayim. Az yashir Moshe, Hashir lo yinashe, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, V'kayikonen Yirmiyah, V'nahanihi nihiyah, B'tzeisi mirushalayim. B'tzeisi hiskonan, V'shachan he'anan, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, V'chamas el shachna, alai kanana, B'tzeisi mirushalayim. Galeyam Ramu, V'chacho Mahakamu, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Zedonim Shatafu, Ve'aroshi Tzafu, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Degan Shamayim, Umitzor Mayim, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, La'ana umerorim, umayim hamarim, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Hashkem beha'arev, Sviros ha'chorev, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Korei el Evel, al naharos Babel, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Amarei kivod Adonai, Ke'esh ochelas lefanai, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, B'cherev letusha, U'letevach netusha, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Zebach u'mincha, B'shemen hamishcha, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Skulas el lekucha, Katzon latibcha, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Chagim v'shabbasos, U'movsim v'osos, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Tanis va'evel, U'redov ha'hevel, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Tovu ohalim, Le'arba'a degalim, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Ohalei Yishmaelim, U'machanos arelim, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Yovel u'shmita, Be'eretz shehoketa, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Machor litzmizus, V'charus lichrisus, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Kaporis ve'aron, Be'avnei zikaron, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Be'avnei hakela, Uchelei habela, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Leviim ve'aharonim, B'shiv'im zekenim, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Logishim u'monim, U'mochrim bekonim, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Moshe yir'enu, V'aharon yahanachenu, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Nebuchadnezzar, Ba'adrianus Caesar, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Naroch milchama, V'Adonai shama, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Rachak mimenu, V'hinei einenu, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Sisrei faharoches, B'sidrei ma'areches, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Chemani teches, alai socheches, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Olos uzvachim, V'ishei nichochim, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, B'cherev v'dukarim, B'nei Tzion hayekarim, B'tzeisi mirushalayim, Parei migbaos, Lechavod nikbaos, B'tzeisi mimitzrayim, Shrikos u'seruos, Lekalon uzvaos, B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, Tzitz hazahav, v'hameshel v'rahav, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, Hushlach hanezer, v'yafas ha'ezer, B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, Kedusha u'nevuah, u'chavod Adonai nirah, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, Nigala umora, Beruach hatuma, B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, Arina v'Yeshua, B'chatzotzros hatrua, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, Zakas olal, Benakas halal, B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, Shulchan u'menorah, B'chalil u'ktorah, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, Elil v'soeva, U'fesel u'matzeva, B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, Torah u'seuda, U'chilei hachemda, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, Sason v'simcha, v'nasyagon v'anacha, b'shuvi l'Yerushalayim.
Rabbi, you're going to introduce this one, and then David Zimbalist is going to read it.
Okay, that sounds good. We move forward in time from, of course, we were already in this last Kinnot, took us back to the glory of Yetziat Mitzrayim, but our focus has been in the Churban Habayit, whether it's the first temple destruction, the second temple era, and we shift ourselves into the Middle Ages. And our next Kinnot is on, this is Kinnot number 22 in the Koran. It's not on page 515 in the Art Scroll of 304. No, excuse me. It is 425 or 256. All right, there we go. Here we read a Kinnot Hacharishu, which focuses us on the mass suicides in the face of forced conversion to Christianity that took place during the height or the depths of the Rhineland massacres in the years 1096, referred to also as the Gzeirat Tatno, the edicts of the Judaic calendar 4856. There were a series of mass murders of Jews that were perpetrated by mobs of Christians against all the Jews of the Rhineland. This is not the first time that Jews, beyond the story of the Churban Habayit, had faced the wrath and the anger and the murder of by the hands of Christians. Such things had already begun earlier in time. In the 7th century, there were mass expulsions and forced conversions. There were other attacks in 888 against the Jews of Mainz, and a plot against Jews in Limoges in 992, and then in the year 1000, and a threat of expulsion from Trier in 1066. This is different. This is one that impacted in such a horrible way across the Rhineland. Many of our tefillot that we have, memorial prayers that we recite, as we note, during the Omer period, were penned in response to the Crusades and the aftermath of the Crusades, destruction. Av Harachamim and Akel Maleh, these tefillot are harken back to that era of time. The historian Shalom Bar Shimshon, who lived shortly after this period, describes that there was a stated intention of one of the Crusader fighters, Godfrey of Bouillon. Remember, the Crusaders are sort of moving from the east westward and then down, making their way to expel Muslims from the Holy Land. Along the way, they practice on Jews, and it was stated in the name of Godfrey. It's at least how it's quoted, that he would go. He swore to go on this journey only after avenging the blood of the crucified one by shedding Jewish blood, and completely eradicating any trace of those bearing the name Jew, thus assuaging his own burning wrath. There are those who say that what happened here was mostly about money, that the Crusaders were already running out of supplies and needed money, and the Jews of the Rhineland were relatively comfortable, and so they either killed the Jews or they extorted money from Jews to get their wealth and to be able to pay for their mission. But this second component is one that sees it as a religious battle against Jews and Christ killers, even as their initial intention and primary goal was against Muslims. The Jews are the ones who are in their way, or at least on the way. We're told historically that the Jews, the Rhineland, here's actually a matter of somewhat, a bit of dispute, whether or not the Jews of the Rhineland were offered the opportunity to convert or not, and in the face of that, did they choose not to? Some apparently did choose to, but perhaps a very important essay on this by, I believe it was Gerson Cohen. I try to contrast what happened in Spain, where Jews en masse chose to convert and lead secret Jewish lives, whereas for the most part, the Jews of the Rhineland chose not to convert, instead to meet their deaths. And we actually have here a description, and here we meet part of the essence of this Kinnot, that Jews simply didn't meet their fate at the hands of the sword of the other, but even took their own lives and took the lives of their families along with, to not succumb, not to be tortured, and not to be forced to convert to Christianity. And theologically, they leaned back on certain stories, whether it's the story of Masada, as much as people knew about it, or more significantly on the story of the Akedah and martyrdom in this way, and that at least gave them some comfort, because this is something that we're not comfortable with. That taking one's life in general is forbidden, but in order not to become an Oved Avodah Zarah, as they might have seen it, it was a high calling, as they imagined, but a great tragedy along the way. So we read this Kinnot now, commemorating them and all those who gave their lives in that period of time for the Al Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of God's name.
Afarishu mimeni vadabera v'yavra laima Hamas ezok b'shel lacha shochen shemaima hatikatni yuchi lochal edoma keleda eshaf v'eshoma mispein mar eseh v'akorein b'nehima divrei shagotai yitku kayama titi aladati asher nitna l'shama arid b'sichi v'ahima b'koli nihi yarima Ech Shabbat Masos Va'arva Simcha Kol Panim Parur V'chol Rosh Karcha V'chol Zakan Geru'a V'al Kol Lev Anacha Me'az Nitorer Goy Az Koreh Shucha Tila Birai Hogei Oz Mivtecha V'tilotai V'achvar Nasach B'nesicha Rosh Kol Chutzot Niglatam Chasucha Olalai v'tapai nechshavu ketzon tivcha, Elila al zot b'dimati alecha, Ta'asru alai dvuyei tzon nidacha, L'harbot habechi ulharim hatzvacha, Elilu shamayim v'zahaki adama, Arid b'sichi v'ahima, V'koli nihi arima, Erilim tz'u v'tza'aku mara, Tifo tamrur hadu b'chabura kol kachola tzara kamakira onanu al adat seb terzura alemo ki nigzra dera b'chariach v'zam v'evra nidbadu b'prishut v'tahara l'kadesh shem hagado v'hanora mishet achiv chizku be'ezra hizavek b'yira tahora b'li lichora lichroa avodah zara Lo chasu al gever bira albanim tziraat tifara aval arzru vura yetera halom rosh likrot shizra valemo dibru ba'mira lo zakinu b'gedel chen l'torah mikrivchen tola v'haftara miskek imachem l'ora hatzuna me'en kol va'aluma Arid b'sichi v'ahima b'koli nehi arima. אז הסכימו גדולים קטנים לקבל באהבה דין של חן מעונים. וזקנים דשנים ורעננים הם היו תחילה נידונים. ויצאו לקראתם עזי פנים ונהרגו המונים נתערבו פרדים עם פרשדונים. האבות אשר היו רחמנים נהפכו לאכזר קיינים והפיצו על אבות ועל בנים. מי שגורל עלה לו ראשונים ונשחט בחלפות וסכינים ואחרים עלי תולה אמונים הם לקחו עפר קטנים והפעלות לבושים שנים מולפות בזרועות החתנים ונלקחות בחרב וחידונים. זכרו זאת קהל עדת נבונים ואל תחסו מהרבות כנים והפסידו על חסידים הגונים אשר צללו במים הזדונים. וזכר זאת נשי אדומה אריד בשיחי והימה בקולי נהי הרימה. תורה כגריסק והתעלשי באפרים אבל יחיד עשי לך מספד תמרורים אל תופסי משעותייך ופורסי כמחמורים מלכייך וחולייך במים אדירים עורבי מערבך מאשרי הדורים ופענחי ציפורנייך מגלי מסתורים מקצה בגבעות מי יסתת בהרים מי יפרק הוויות מי יתרק שברים יפתי נזירות מי ירוך נדרים משדה מעמקייך וחטאו עיקרים מי ילחום מלחמתך וישוב לשערים כלי מלחמה עבדו ונפלו גיבורים אשריהם משכילים כרקיע זוהרים ונחות שלום נחו ישרים אוי ואבוי שד ושבר לנעלן עותרים ומדיבת נפש וחבלים וצירים וכליון עיניים אצל מוות ולא סדרים ערב אומרים מי ייתן ספרים ובוקר מצפים מגלה אורים ממראה עינימו אשר המה שרים מחוץ שקלה חרב המה מחדרים עד מתי תביט רואה כל ספרים קנה לתורתך אשר בזו נהרים קראוה לגזרים כסירים סבוכים הגדילו המדורים העל אלה תתאפק אדון כל יצורים במקום דם הנשפך כמים המוגרים משוד עניים מעין קצורים על שבי פשע לאומים ומרורים קומה והינשא על צרים הצוררים פעמך במשרות הרימה אריב בשיחי והימה וקולי נהי הרימה.
Okay, Rabbi Noam is going to read this one after you introduce it.
Okay, yes, he's going to be introducing.
Ah,
So this Kinnot number 41, is written by the Maharam of Rottenburg, and it's in response to the burning of the Talmud that was done in Paris in 1242 by the Catholic Church. I'm not a historian. I know some historians have shared some historical anecdotes, so I don't have much to say on the history of this. But the piece here that I found, the pieces here that I found fascinating, are the anguish, first of all, that the Maharam feels this is unheard of, and there's a metaphor here, meaning obviously the Talmud being burned. At least I shouldn't say obviously, right? This is pre-printing press, so there's a fear here that this will be lost. It will be lost forever. This information will be lost, and indeed, I don't know if the commentary, the Soloveitchik commentary, is in the packet, but in the book, you can see that this is actually there's only one manuscript of the Talmud that survived from this era. And there's a famous book, Dikduke Sofrim, which is used to show the variance between this and others. But there's a real fear that this body of work, this information, which is not just information, is not just a body of work, will be lost to us forever. So the Kinnot hits on a number of metaphors that just show this feeling of loss and how can this be? And so I picked on one line. It says, "V'esha'al hayesh Torah chadasha b'chein yisrufu glilayich," and we'll ask them, has a new Torah been given? Is that why the old scrolls were burned? Meaning, okay, right, and in some theoretical idea, the maybe there's time, right? It should obviously, I think, reminds us perhaps the idea of the New Testament here, but the idea that is this Torah that you gave us, Hashem, at Sinai, no longer valid? That we're now going to burn this one because we're going to replace it? Are you giving a new one? Obviously, the answer is no. I was also struck later in the Kinnot, which says, "Lo eshma od l'kol sharim b'sharot." No longer will I listen to the voices of your singers. The singers here are a metaphor for the Torah scholars. And if the singers stop singing their songs, right? I mean, we're in a world in which everything we can find by the click of a button musically. Somebody who does that a lot. But this is right here. If the singers are lost, then the song will be lost. The singers will be lost, and the song will be lost. As it says in Dvarim, write this song for yourselves, teach it to the children of Israel. The Torah is a song. And so both the print, both the book that has been lost, as well as the people who wrote it, who teach it, their loss is just so powerful and so potentially destructive to our lives. And so, as we'll read now about that, we'll think about the importance of this book, of these words, and of the song, and of the singers, the teachers who teach it to us.
Okay, Noam.
Sorry, am I reading in English or Hebrew?
I believe in the Hebrew, if that's okay.
Whatever you want, it's fine.
Shalis rufa ve'esh lishom avelaich hamis avim shechom b'chatzar zvulaich hajafim ba'afar eretz va'koavim hamishtomimim alei moked gvilaich hochim chashichim ve'ein noga v'kovim la'or yomam aleihem asher yizrach ve'alayich ushlom enosh ne'anach boche belev nishbar tamid mekonen alai tzirei chavalayich Vayis onein kesanim uvenos yana Vaikra misped mar biglalayich Eicha nisuna ve'esh ochla Tukal be'esh basar Velo nichvu zarim begachalayich Ad an adina Tihi shochna berov hashket Ufnei prachai halochasu charulayich Teshev barov gava mishpot b'nei el b'chol hamishpatim u'visavi b'fli layich od tigzor lisrof das esh v'chukim v'lachein ashrei sheyeshalem lach mulayich Tzuri v'lapid v'esh halvavur ze nesanech ki ba'achariseich telahet esh b'shulayich Sinai ha'alkein b'cha b'achar Elohim u'ma'as bigdolim v'zarach b'gvulayich Lios lemofet, ladat kisis ma'et, v'tered mikvoda, v'hein emshol mishalayich. Mashal lemelech asher bacha lemishtevino, safa asher yigva, kain at bimilayich. Tachas meil, tiskas sinai levushcha b'sak, tata levush almenus tachalif smalayich. Orid demaos adei yuchenachal ve'agiu likivros shnei sarei atzilayich Moshe ve'Aaron behor hahar ve'esh al hayesh Torah chadasha b'chein nisrefu glilayich chodesh shlishi v'akshar harvi'i lashchis chemdaseich v'chol yofich chlilayich Gadal leluchos ve'od shana be'ivalto Misof be'esh das hazeh sashlum kefelaich. Esma lenafshi ve'ech gerav lechuki achol acharei rosi asher asfu shalalayich. El toch rechova kinidachas v'sarfu shalal elyon asher tim aslavo kehalayich. Lo ed'a limtso derech slula Hachi hayu avelos nesiv yosher b'misilayich yumtak b'fi midvash limsoch b'mashket demaos uleragli hayos kavul kevalayich Yarav le'enai she'ov meimei dma'ai adei chalu lechol machazik bichnaf mi'ilayich Af yecheravu biridatam al lechayai avor ki nichmeru rachamai lindod be'alayich lakach tzror kaspo halach bederech lemerachok v'imo halo nasu tzlalayich v'ani chechachul v'galmud nish'arti levad mehem kisoren berosh har migdalayich lo eshma od lekol sharim b'sharos Alechi nitku mesre supe chalilayich elbash ve'eskas besak kili ma'od yakru atzmu kechol yirbiyun nafshos chalalayich esma me'od al me'od hayom asher yizrach el kol aval yechshach elai ve'elayich zaki ve'kol mar letzor al shivronech ve'al chalyech Velo yizkor avas klulayich chigri levush sak alehav ara asher yatza lechalek v'safsa es tzulayich kimos enusech yenachmech tzur v'yashiv shavus shivte yeshurun v'yarim es shvalayich Od tadi va'adi shani v'sof tikhi telchi v'machol v'tzali b'mcholayich Yarum levavi ve'es tzuri lo orlach Ashkeich ve'ya'iru afelayich
Okay, Rabbi Chaim Ezra is going to read the next Kinnot after you play the video.
Okay, so we will hear an introduction briefly that takes place that's offered by the chief rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Shudruk, at the Warsaw Ghetto Monument. We'll say a few words of introduction, and then if Ezra is open to it, maybe he'll share a reflection or a memory, however painful we know that is, for you to do so. And Ezra, we're going to put on the screen the Kinnot that we're going to be having you lead us with, okay? So you can hopefully read it on the screen. If that doesn't work for you and you read the other Kinnot in your Kinnot book, we'll just follow along on the screen and you'll read whatever you're moved to read. Okay.
We're standing here in Warsaw, Poland, at the famous monument for the ghetto fighters, the Warsaw Ghetto Fighters, but we're standing on the opposite side of the famous part because what we have here, on the other side is the part with the fighters. But here we have the part with expulsion. And if you take a look, this is depiction of the Jews being forced out of Jerusalem. Tisha B'Av 70, almost 2,000 years ago. But if you take a look at the very far right-hand part, in the back pushing them out are German Nazis. Which started on Tisha B'Av. Unfortunately, had a continuity all the way through the Shoah. And so, we now have the Kinnot written by Rabbi Shimon Schwab, a rabbi who was born in Germany, 1908, Frankfurt am Main, who studied in many of the Eastern European yeshivot, like Telz and Mir, studied even with the Chafetz Chaim of Radin. And because he was in Germany, he saw already by the early 30s he couldn't stay, fled in 1936, first to be in Baltimore, later then in New York. And in 1959, Rabbi Schwab was approached by the late Rav Breuer, the famous Rav Breuer of the German Jewish community of Washington Heights, to write a Kinnot, to write an elegy for the Shoah. So I'll read the first stanza of this very moving Kinnot. Azocher maskirav dor kodoshav ume'et asher az bachartanu yizkor deira'on shel dor acharon oya mehayalanu. He who remembers those who remember him, each generation its holy ones, since the time you have chosen us. May he remember the gruesome fate of the last generation. And then the last stanza, El chai merachim adat chanachem, asher lacham od nichsefet, or chadash tazriach, kanei hod tatzmiach, baruch Elohim merachefet. O living God, merciful one, comfort your congregation that yearns for you so mightily. Let new light shine, let rays of glory grow, and may God's Spirit hover. The last several years, we, the living Jewish community of Warsaw, Poland, and we are here, and we live in the shadow, but we live. We come here on Tisha B'Av night, and we sit here after reading Eicha the first time in our synagogue, the Noshim synagogue. We come here and we read at Tisha B'Av night a second time the book of Eicha, because the way that we fight for the future is by never forgetting the past.
I'm sorry. Were you saying? Repeat what you were saying. I'm sorry.
What page am I reading?
Leia's going to put it right on the screen. Do you think you're able to read it from the screen?
Why not?
Okay. And again, if you want to share a word or so, you may do so as well, please.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Azoicha maskirav toyer v'kdosha me'esan sharas v'chartonu yizkor daru shel dor acharon oyu mehayalanu shtifa ma'avaldam shemasva nafshesam kol shikuai imkai habochom yivkerem lehem v'yatzes achayim v'adei adzicham livrocha Tiu Eirav Papayim, Ahu Aishamayim, Hoya Maitav Shifta Yisrael, Adois Glilois, Urim Glilois, Aburais Misudem, Almayadai El, Mitain Palgamayim, Radnuanayim, El Ashdos Nachlai Hadmuaz, עלי אלפי אלופים גופים נשרופים, במוי אש החורבן וזובוי אסורי התוירה מחזיקי מסיירו, הפרחי הכהונות הצעירים, והחשבי מדרושייס מוירם מוירייס, תינוקייס פייס רבון יקירים, אבונוס בת קייסו בסובוי, יל זרם וטפם שילדו, גם לרבויס רבויס נהובים בחיים, ומויסם לא נפרדו. אז דומם דרייש כיסיסו איס רייש, של כל נידב ראו להם הטרופים, כל נפשס מייס בימי שבר דוישס, שישו אלפי פעמים אלופים, שלישי אלבואר בברק זעם צויר, מקרמי החימת אהבתו, גויל הדם נוזכר צרום, אל תמכה מספר כוספתו. זכר חנוכייס ורעש סוכייס, אז יובלו לרייצה, יורד מהם ברימוס פניהם, לא יצחקנו לפני יצא, כל חיל הגניחו אנהיק צריכו, משודה להקייס הכלובים, זכר אספויר בנות קוצרויים, עד אייס נקויים אלבוין אלובים. במחנוס הפרום כאיפן גויים, דבחי נפושי סגומייס, רומייס אצחויק ולימייס ורייק, וצייחקו איומייס, רובן צימואן שגיין מצובוין, כשי נחלו שם בליקויה, בכל נקוס חלום, מכל יוכל אמלו, כל לילה לחום ולשקויה. ושים ראינו שם מכיר שם, כי לא יסעלים עצומות וגידם, אחד ראה על כל שהוא גייס מקוהל, אנחנו כן תחתואי ועדים. סיפוין גופייס וגבייס וגופייס, כל די מנת מסנה יציב. איך הפכות אפיהם, לבודס חלביהם, ואורס השתקשותי הנושים. ופיצוץ הצבועס שרושי אפרועס, נמין שבת פרק, צלמו בסתסמויה. והכירו יריעס על חפרי הפרייס, וישראל חיבותי בהרידם שיויו. איך אינו החיוסנו, סרצי בנויסנו, כוסס תראילו מדי רויפים אכלו בורים. ופריטי הסרידס במחילוס ושרופס בורים. ותמיון יודעים בבותי שדת כמוהרים. סייתום אלוהילו, גם בני הגוילה, הויר אריאל מגיבס חסידי יעקב, ציין קדושם מימי, אשר ישם לא יסרבי, וגנקו יו במקשי שמי יעקב. וכל שמע ישראל מסרו נפש רועל, שהוא יעשה והתיום מאחורי, וזיקו דין והפנים אמן ונהיה, שלו רגשי שירז בתוכו. וכן נשאר עם כיוסם אתם, ולקבורם להשתטח, ולא ימצא בס איפה לבכות. יבואו אצלי באוכלוסייה, רק נסחי אדם, אסקרסון תסם ולהשתתף. Uraya prakadusam, rumhasishitaim mispayach. Nia malatzar yisrolan shadatoim mekayf metrefes. Visheres hapag gemat meseil. Vech kumusoi hayom nefese nefese. Achaim merachem adaskun rachem. Anshalachum oit netzefes. Kudash taslicha unehoit nisniach. Veruach Elohim merachefes.
Thank you, Ezra, for leading us. So with all of this, throughout the ages, through to the darkest of times that our past generation knew, we know that our hearts and our souls have never ceased to yearn for Zion and to return once more to our holy land, to Zion. There are a series of Kinnot that we refer to as the Zion or the Zionized Kinnot. Yehuda Halevi was a great poet and Talmud Chacham, who eventually, we're told, made his way to Eretz Israel. There are legends of perhaps meeting his fate on the stairs that go down from the old city down towards the Kotel. You go there, you'll see there's a sign that calls them the Madrigot of Yehuda Halevi, his stairs, because there was this legend that as he was making his way, maybe for the first time towards the Kotel, he was run over by a horseman, and somehow that's at least a version of a story. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But certainly here is a soul and a heart that personally yearned for Zion, left Spain, and made his way there, and then wrote poetry that would bring us there as well. And it's really a very beautiful poem. We'll be looking at Halo Tisha Ali, perhaps the most famous of them. It's number 36, and in the other Kinnot books, it's 555 in Koren, or Art Scroll 328 in Rosenfeld 152. He describes the beauty of Israel. I don't know whether he wrote this once he was there, or he wrote it based on his biblical knowledge and his mind's eye and imagination of what Israel was. To feel every anguish in every place where the Jews suffered, and to feel the glory of every place which the Jews walked and lived, and he imagines himself and walks himself in each of those places. And the latter part, paragraph Tzion Klilat Yafi, right, Tzion, which is perfectly beautiful. He describes from the prisoner's dungeon, they yearn for you and bow, each one of them from his place towards your gates, even in prison. The flocks of your multitudes, which have been exiled and dispersed from mountain to hill, have not forgotten your walls.
I was born and grew in the Soviet Union in the years when the policy of Soviet regime was to erase everything Jewish from our lives. So I was absolutely assimilated Soviet Jew, knowing nothing about our tradition, about our holidays, about our faith. And in fact, there was nothing Jewish in our life except from anti-Semitism. But then when in 1967, Israel entered our life, and when suddenly all the world looks at you and says, how you guys did it in Israel, you discover that this mystical connection between you and Israel is the most natural thing. You learn in the underground about your history, and you decide that is the history that you want to be part of it. You meet with Jews who are coming as tourists from different parts of the world, and they say we are the family, we want to help you. And you discover the family. And you know that there is a state which is ready to do everything to bring you freedom. And that's how you discover your identity, the history, the people, the state, that you want to be part of it, and that gives you strength to start fighting for your freedom. And the example of the first Jewish activists, of the first prisoners of Zion, realization that there are people who are living near you and who are ready to do everything including to go for many years to prison in order to be part of their people, that also gives you strength to start fighting. So when, for a number of years, I was one of the activists of our movement, and when finally I was arrested and brought to the trial, accused in high treason, threatened to be sentenced to death, and the judge asked me what I want to say in my last word to the court, I said very simple, to the court I have nothing to say, but to my people and to my state I say, L'Shana Rabba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Because I knew that if there is oath which connects all of us, if I want to be sure that in the years to come, when I'll be in prison, the Jewish people will keep fighting for my release, there were no better words connecting us than the expression of this hope, of this prayer, of this kmicha, the strong desire to come to Jerusalem. And really, in the years to come, KGB, the secret police, will do everything to convince me that I'm alone, that I'm forgotten, that people are afraid to mention my names and the names of my friends because we're believed to be spies. And I knew that all this is lie. I knew enough about my people to be sure that the struggle for my release and the other prisoners of Zion never stops. And really the day came and I was released and went straight to Israel. And after me, many other, practically all the prisoners of Zion were released. And then the Iron Curtain fell. And millions of Jews went to freedom and joined us in Israel. And that is the power of our solidarity. That is the power of our dream. That is the power of our prayers and our connection with Jerusalem. L'Shana Rabba B'Yerushalayim Abnaya.
Okay, Bernie Adler is going to be reading this next one. I'll put it up on screen.
This would be our last Kinnot, and then we'll join together for Eli Tzion to conclude.
Tzion halo tishali l'shlom asirayich doshei shlomech v'em yeser adorayich miyam mizrach mitzafon v'teiman shalom rachov v'karov si mikol avarayich u'shlom asir tikva nosei dimav ketal chermon v'niksaf l'riditam al hararayich lichbot enusech Ani tamim v'yesech alom shivat sivusech ani kinor li shirayich libi lebeisel ulefnim ma'od yemel ulemachanayim v'chol pigei tahavrayich sham hashchina shchein alach v'atzarech pasach lemul shar shachach she'arayich וכבוד אדוני לבד היה מאורך, ואין שמש ושר וכוכבים מאירייך. אבחר לנפשי להשתפך, במקום אשר רוח אלוהים שפוכה על בחירייך. עד בית מלוכה ועד כיסא אדוני, ואיך ישבו עבודים עלי כיסוס כבירייך. Mitneni mishotet b'vakamot asher niglu Elohim v'chozayich v'tzirayich miyaseh li knafayim v'yachik nedor anid l'visrei l'veis beis b'sarayich epol lape atzei alei ertzech V'yertzeh avonayich mi'od v'yachonen es aforayich akobo moadi alei kivros avosai v'yes tomem v'chevron alei mivchar kevorayich evor v'yarech v'chamilech v'yemdor b'glodech V'yeshtal mama al har avorayich, har ha'avorim behor har, asher som shnei orim gdolim mirayich umorayich. Chaye neshama v'ratzech, u'midar durar avkas avorech, v'nofes suf neharayich, Yinaz nafshi halo orom, v'yachef alei harvos shemama, asher hayu devirayich, b'mkom aronech asher nignaz, ובמקום קירורייך אשר שכנו חדרי החדורייך. אגוז וישלך פרד נגזה ויקוף זמן, חילל בארץ ומיה אס נזירייך. אחיה רב לי אוכל ושתוס, ויעשר חזק כי יזכבו הכלב גמס כפירייך. Oy echmod yom yehi masok leinai v'nei erep v'fiore orchim pigrei nisharayich kos ha'igonim la'at harpi miyad chok var maluk zolai v'nafshi mimorayich. Eskara Allah, Eshtech Havorech, Yeskar Aliva, Yemtse Es Shimarayich, Tion, Klilas Yifi, Ava, V'chein Tikshuri Meyaz, Uvach Nishun, Minat Nafshos Haverayich. Heim Hasimechim, Shalvasech, V'kochavim al shimum v'sech u'vochim al shivarayich Mimchor shivi shoafim negdech Mishtachavim ish mimkomo Aleim nochach shivarayich Edrei hamonech asher golu v'istap zuru mehar legiva Lo shachru g'deirayich Hamachach zikim beshulayich misatzmim lalos leechos bisansinei timorayich chinar ufasros ayakuk bigadlam ve'im hevom yidamu kisumayich ve'urayich elmei yidamu mishichayich V'yamin Leviayich, V'yamin Leviayich, V'sharayich, Yishnev v'yachalof Kalil, Kol v'avachos halil, Chasnam le'olam, L'dor v'adar nizarayich, Ivech l'moshav Elohayich, Yashrei enoshi v'yivachar v'yikra v'yishkon b'chatzerayich, Ashrei mechakev yagia v'yireh alos orech v'yivaku alav shecharayich l'ros b'tovas b'chirayich v'alos b'simchosech b'shuvech elai kadmas nirayich.
So I am told that there was a custom that Jews did not publish Kinnot books, even though we now have these hardcover Kinnot books. There was a custom instead to always make them somehow loosely bound, and obviously after the printing press. Loosely bound, poor quality booklets, because we wanted to carry firm the belief and the hope that this would be the last year when we recite Kinnot. So we make that statement by making them flimsy. We have a bunch of those flimsies in a box across the street from my home right now in the office there. But the reality is, until we do so, perhaps the hardcover books with the translations have helped us. But still, we recognize that until that moment in time arrives, when full redemption happens, and we again are privileged to live in a time when redemption has begun. Until the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, we continue to mourn. and that's an Eli. That's a a lament that we continue to carry. And as we recite this last Kinnot together, and then Terachim Tzion that follows, Eli Tzion, which can be found, will be on the screen in a moment, can be found in the number 45, and Korana on page 611, Art Scroll 390, Rosenfeld at 176. We're aware of that. We say we will continue as if we imagine ourselves to be a mother who lost a child, or a lover who lost her husband who went out to battle, that somehow that pain always continues. It will never disappear. We carry the pain of the past with us until the full redemption happens soon and in our day. So it's our custom to stand. We have a melody which we began singing already last Friday night for L'Chadodi. And we read these words of elegy together. Ayeli Tzion be'areha, kimo isha betzireha, v'chi v'sula. Please join me on your own there. V'chagu rasak, ahabal neureha, alei armon asher nutash, Be'ashmason adareha, be'al bias mechar fe'el, be'soch mikdash chadareha, alei galus mishar ese'el, mani meshir zemareha, be'al damam asher shupach, Kemo me'meyo reha, alei hegyon mecholeha, asher damam bi'areha, bi'alvad asher shamim, uvitul sanhedreha, alei zivchei semideha, ufidyonei bechoreha, bi'al chilul kelei heichal, Umizbach ketoreha, alei tapei melacheha, b'nei David gevireha, be'al yafyam asher chashaf, be'eis saruk kisareha, alei chavod asher gala, be'eis korban devireha, be'al lochetz asher lachatz, V'sam sakim chagoreha, alei machas v'rov makos, asher hilku nezireha, ve'al niputz elei sela, ola leha ne'areha, alei simcha hasoiveha, v'sacha kamal shivareha, ve'al inoi b'nei chorin, Nediveha tehoreha, alei atesha asher avasa, selo derech ashureha, be'al tzivos kehaleha, shezufeha shechoreha, alei kolos mecharfeha, be'eis rabu fegareha, Bial rikshas megadefeha, besoch mishkan achat seireha, alei shimcha asher chulal, befi kamei metzeireha, bial tachan yitzabachulach, kishovu shema amareha, Eli Tzion de'areha, kemo isha betzireha, V'chi v'sulach aguras sak, ahal bal neureha. Recite together. Adonai b'chi v'tzim b'mitzvah Yerushalayim, terachem Tzion, mesivnech omos Yerushalayim, terachem Tzion, kasher amarta, u'sechoneha kasher dibarta, timaher Yeshua v'sachish geula, v'sashuv Yerushalayim b'rachamim rabim, kakasu v'yad nebiyacha, l'chein kol Adonai shavti Yerushalayim b'rachamim, beisi bane banu Adonai tzvot, Oz, Bekav Yinater Al Yerushalayim V'nemar Od Kira Limor Ko Amar Adonai Tzivaos Od Tefutzena Raimi Tov Nicham Adonai Od Esiyon Bachar Od Yerushalayim V'nemar Nicham Adonai Tzion Nicham Kol Chavoseha V'Yasem Raked and Rabasaka Gan Adonai Sason V'Simcha Yimat Seva Toda B'Kol Zimra. Thank you for sticking with us, and I hope that the rest of the day can be meaningful for you. We've sent out some links to other sites that have shiurim and some videos. If you have Netflix and you want to go watch some powerful movies about the Shoah or about the challenges of Medinat Yisrael, that's an encouraging thing. And go out and do mitzvahs after midday to help people that you know could use your help. We hope and we pray this is our last Tisha B'Av morning to be able to turn it to one of celebration indeed. This evening, after midday is 101. Afterwards, you can rise from low-seated chairs. Again, we certainly don't. Everything else remains in place in terms of not eating and drinking and the like. 7:45 is mincha. The fast ends at Leah. What time was it? 9:01, I think it is.
I just remember the earlier time was 8:47.
9:01. If people are especially challenged, you can hold out at least to 8:47. That's sort of the other Zman. We try to keep the later Zman for Tisha B'Av as if it were similar to Yom Kippur. But at 8:47, if that's where you're at, that works as well. Let it be a meaningful one, and we wish each other all good things in the future.